Hey loves, Haley Steinfeld here. Let's be real. When I'm on the red carpet, everyone wants to know whose dress I'm wearing. But here's the thing. We're so focused on those details, we're missing something that's actually way more important. Breast health. It's wild. Breasts get so much attention, but they're still so ignored when it matters most. Don't know what I'm talking about? Tune in on February 9th and visit yourattentionplease.com. That's yourattentionplease.com. See you then.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome, folks. This is the Steve Moore More Money Show on WABC. Such an honor to be in front of this microphone with you for the next 2 hours. Welcome to all our listeners in the New York City metropolitan area, but also the people listening to our other affiliates throughout the country. And I know we have a lot of people who listen online as well. Thank you so much for making this show a success. Our ratings are excellent, and that's because we have so many smart people who routinely listen to our show. If you're a new listener, I hope you enjoy it. We talk about money. We talk about politics. We talk about the economy. We talk about how you can make more money. And so a lot to talk about. My gosh, I can't possibly in 2 hours cover all of the amazing things that are happening in Washington, D.C. with this incredible new president, Donald J. Trump, who was stampeded. I told you all on this show that Trump would stampede right out of the gates like Secretariat, and boy, has he. It's been basically 3 weeks. It feels like he's done more in 3 weeks than just about any president does in 4 years, and he's just getting started. And as someone who knows Trump, I've spent a lot of time with him over the last 8 years. I saw him a week ago. I think what's going on here is that he understands that he has one term left. You know that he cannot run for re-election. So he has 4 years to get everything done to make our country great again. And realistically, that's more like 2 years, really, because after 2 years in office, you start looking towards the next presidential election. And so he is very mindful of that. And he wants to, I believe Donald Trump wants to go down in history as one of our greatest presidents. And he knows he has an opportunity to do that. There's an old saying that if you always want to succeed a failure. If you have a new job, you always want the person who had your job before you to be a failure. It's always hard to succeed a success because, the bar is so high. The bar is really low for Trump as it was, when he took over in 2016 after the 8 years of the wreckage of the Barack Obama administration. And then Biden comes in and wrecks the economy even more than Barack Obama did. And so he has a very, very low bar. I mean, Joe Biden, I think, will go down in history as a financial catastrophe for our country. And so Trump wants to resurrect this American economy. He wants to do it through tax cuts, deregulation. He wants to produce as much energy and minerals as possible. We are the most resource-rich country in the world. It's obscene that we're importing minerals and oil and gas when we have more of it than just about any other country in the world. And so this is an amazing opportunity that we have. And have you noticed what's happening with the left? I mean, their heads are just blowing up right now. They cannot believe that Donald Trump is doing the things that he's doing. By the way, I don't agree with everything Trump does. If you're a regular listener to this show, you know that I like to call it straight. And I will, when Trump does things I don't think are sensible, I will call it out. But I think most of the things that Trump are doing are logical and commonsensical and good for America and will put America first. And as Trump always says, those are the kinds of things that need to be done. Now, let's get specific. By the way, I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend. It's cold out there, folks. It is a cold Saturday in the month of February. So good day to, do some housework and listen to the radio and listen to the More Money Show. But I've got to tell you, if you look at what has gone on with respect to Doge. And it's almost like right now we have a co-presidency with Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And of course, Trump is the president, and no one's going to replace him from that position. But Elon Musk, just a few years ago, the left loved Elon Musk. I mean, oh my gosh, he built electric vehicle cars, and he's a wonderful guy. And now that he is a Trumpian, the left has really turned on him. But what the real thing that he's doing that I find is fascinating and actually long overdue is he's looking at all these agencies. Let's take the hullabaloo about the Agency for International Development. Now, folks, I've been in this game for 40 years. I became the budget expert at Heritage Foundation in the mid 1980s. So I know these. I'm intimately familiar with these programs. The Agency for International Development has not caused any development. Its job is to try to bring development and economic growth to these countries in Africa and South America and poorer areas of the world, which is a great mission. We'd love to do that. But guess what? The AID does not do that. It has become a self-serving agency that has become a revolving door. It is completely corrupt. Trump is right about that, and so is Elon Musk. What happens, and I know people have done this, people go work at the agency and the do-gooders, we're going to do so well with American taxpayers. We're going to send American taxpayers all over the world. And then what happens is that it doesn't lead to any economic development. You all know Steve Moore's plan for economic development. If we want to help these countries grow and become prosperous like the United States, it's very simple. We get 25 massive cargo planes. We fill those planes with Milton Friedman's book, which is called Capitalism and Freedom. And then we airdrop them out of the windows over these countries and let all the citizens read these books, because economic growth is not complicated. You adopt free market policies, you adopt economic freedom. The Heritage Foundation has done a great report now for the last 25 or 30 years where they rate countries in terms of their economic freedom. The United States is obviously in the top 5 or 6, and you got places like Singapore and Switzerland. And it turns out the more economic freedom you have, the more economic growth and prosperity you have. And it's a linear relationship. So all you have to do is eliminate obese government, deregulate your economy, let the free market system work, and your people will get rich. This is not rocket surgery, as my son used to say. This is something that is so patently obvious. And USAID is the opposite. What they do is they make countries more dependent on government. Government to government aid is no way to make a country rich. And so what happens is these do-gooders go in and work at USAID for, 5 or 6 years and think they're going to change the world. And of course, they never do it. I mean, they're well-intentioned, but the aid is not a way to help countries. There's an old saying, give a man a fish and he eats for a day, teach a man to fish and he works for a lifetime. We're giving people fish. We're not actually teaching them how to grow their economy. But then what these people do is then they get out of the USAID and they start something called a non-governmental organization. And these are tax-deductible organizations that are totally funded with government. Guess where that government funding comes from? Oh, yeah, the USAID. And then they get rich off of it. And how is that a program that's helping the poor people in Africa? It doesn't. And so Trump is so right, and so is Elon Musk, to get rid of that. I'm going to give you another example, and you can tell I feel strongly about this. Trump is basically saying maybe we could just get rid of the Department of Education. Oh my God, Trump hates education. He's going to do damage to our school children, blah, blah, blah. Wait a minute. Let's just assess. Let's be level-headed about this. Over the last, I think you all know, Jimmy Carter created the U.S. Department of Education back in 1979 as a wet kiss to the teachers' unions, because the teachers' unions are who elected Jimmy Carter. And he said, if you elect me, I will give you your own cabinet agency so you can run the school system. Well, that didn't help the education system. It actually led to its demise. And so what happened over the next course of the past 45 years or so, is that the education department has been filled with the education union people, the National Education Association and other unions. And they have used that agency not to help improve our schools, but they've used it as a piggy bank for themselves. And so you have a situation right now. You all saw the test scores that came out a couple of weeks ago. Even after we're spending record amounts of money. And by the way, not only did we have a huge increase in the Department of Education's funding over that 40-year period, but Biden added $175 billion with a B dollars to the U.S. Department of Education. That's a lot of money, $175 billion. How much of that money do you think actually got into the classroom? Think about that. How much do you think actually benefited our children? Well, the test scores tell the whole story. The test scores tell us that we had the worst test scores in 30 years or something like that. Don't quote me. I think 25 or 30 years, but really bad test scores. And they've certainly fallen. They fell significantly during Biden's presidency. They fell very significantly because of the outrage of shutting down our schools during COVID. That was an unforgivable error. We can never allow that to happen again. And by the way, who are the biggest advocates for shutting down the schools? Oh yeah, the teachers unions. So why don't we do this? This is the Steve Moore education reform. Let's take the I think it's $80 to $100 billion a year that we spend each year in Washington, D.C., and instead of having a massive structure in Washington with thousands and thousands of people who've never even been inside a classroom outside of Washington, D.C., why don't we just send that money directly to poor parents and let them choose whatever school they want? I guarantee you, folks, that if we sent that money directly to parents, let them send their kids to Catholic schools or charter schools or this school or that school, maybe, if they want to stay in their public school, they can do that. This would be the single greatest thing we could do to enhance our economic growth over the future. Because, folks, we cannot be a world economic superpower if our kids can't read and do math. And that's what's happening in our country. I hate to sound that siren alarm, but it is happening, folks. We're creating a generation of illiterates because of what has happened to our schools. The Catholic schools, I'm going to end with this because I got to take a break. They're shouting at me. The Catholic schools, this is a general rule of thumb. It's not true in all circumstances, but in most circumstances it is. In the Catholic schools, a child can get a better education at half the cost than in the public schools. Let me say that again. In the Catholic schools, you can get a better education at half the cost. So why don't we just contract out the whole school system to the Catholic schools? And by the way, I don't care if you're Catholic, Jewish, whatever it is. My point is they're educating our kids at our public schools or not. Give the money to the parents. Let them choose their schools. What a concept. I'm Steve Moore. This is the More Money Show. This is WABC, and we'll be right back.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. I neglected to mention at the top of the show that, first of all, we are live. We are in color. We will be taking your calls today. It's the favorite part of my show is when I listen to what you have to say. I say it every week. I'll say it again, that we have the smartest listeners in the country who listen to the More Money Show. And so I appreciate you carving out some time of your weekend to listen to the show. The More Money hotline is 1-800-848-9222, 1-800-848-9222, or 1-800-848-WABC. And in a few minutes, I'll start taking your call. And the issue of the day, what do you think about Doge? Do you think that Elon Musk is going too far? Is he cutting too much? Is he exercising too much power? Do you think that Elon Musk and Donald Trump have the authority to cut these programs? And if you have ideas about what you'd like to see them cutting, I'd love to hear from you. And by the way, if you are a Democrat, and I so much appreciate that we have many Democrats listening to this show, we are nonpartisan and we are freedom of speech radio. So we want to hear from people with differing opinions. If you have some thoughts about this, if you want to tell me why you oppose what Elon Musk is doing and what Donald Trump is trying to do in terms of slashing this budget, please call in. Please do. And I'll ask our operator to put you at the front of the line, because I want to hear critics of what Trump and Elon Musk doing, because I think what they're doing is fantastic. But in the meantime, I want to introduce to you a good friend, a colleague, and one of the top economists in the country. Thomas Phillipson worked as how's this? He was the chairman of Donald Trump's Council of Economic Advisors during his first term. He is, as I mentioned earlier, at the University of Chicago. I believe I forget your exact title with them, Tom, but I appreciate you coming on, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Always good to be with you, Steve.
So what is your title at your emeritus?
I was a chair professor there. But I'm emeritus now. I'm still running a center, but I'm also focusing a lot on private sector activities that I'm doing in terms of actually helping people as opposed to just writing papers.
What a concept. And he is also a visiting research fellow at Unleash Prosperity. And if you're not getting the Unleash Prosperity hotline, come on, what's wrong with you? Get it. It's for free. It costs you nothing. It is one of the top daily briefings you can get. And we will email it right to you for nothing. And just go to unleashprosperity.com and sign up. And if you like it, we'll keep sending it to you. If you don't like it, you can just unsubscribe. But I know many of the congressmen and the senators and a lot of Trump's top people and the CEOs of many of our great companies and the people in the media read it. So if you want to be in the know, get the Unleash Prosperity hotline, which is free at unleashprosperity.com. So, Tom, let's talk about your latest column, which I found fascinating, on trade. Obviously, this is a very controversial issue right now and even on the right. I mean, people are free traders, and I think you and I could be classified as free traders, and people who think that these tariffs are either too high or they're not going to work or they're going to cause inflation. What is your take on Trump's latest approach? He just said something yesterday, by the way, where he's talking about reciprocal trade, where he's saying, Tom, that if other countries will cut their tariffs, we'll cut our tariffs. And it's a kind of tit for tat trade strategy. But where do you think this is all headed?
Yeah, I think that's been part of the message all along, essentially. And I think he's using them so far very effectively as a threat. You and I have talked about that before, essentially.
Yes.
That when they're used as a threat, they're certainly not going to be inflationary because they're not going to be implemented if they're a successful threat, which they were obviously with Colombia, and also brought Mexico and Canada to the negotiation table. We'll see what happens in a month when that deadline runs out, essentially.
Hold on. I want to stop you right there, because you just said something really important that I think a lot of people don't, completely understand, especially people in the media. So if you use the threat of a tariff effectively to get other countries to change their behavior, there's no inflationary effect on that because the tariff doesn't take effect.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So I think if you think about it, I've always likened it to Reagan's peace through strength, essentially. Where we used the threat of nuclear weapons. We never used them in 80 years since World War II, but it's been very effective in influencing the world.
Interesting.
If we can use, instead of a strong military, which costs 3% of GDP every year, a little bit more, if we can use a strong economy or not trading with our strong economy as a threat, that's a cheaper threat than a military buildup, essentially. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think Trump has done. He'd done it in the first term as well, when we threatened wine tariffs on France, when they were going to tax our big tech companies with digital taxes, and they immediately stopped. So this is an ongoing sort of behavior which we've seen, which is he's very serious. I mean, he's not afraid to impose these tariffs. People understand that. And there's no way that, in my view, that Mexico exports, 75% of their exports go to U.S., is going to engage in a trade war with the U.S. They're going to back off, which they have so far. Yep. We'll see in a month,
And I think, by the way, that is true. And it's also true of China as well. And China is a gigantic economy, but they cannot possibly grow their economy if they do not have access to America's consumer market. And so Trump is flexing his muscle there as well. I would anticipate, I wonder what you think, that China is now trying to say, tit for tat, are you going to raise our tariffs on us? We're going to raise tariffs on you. The problem for China is that's not going to work because they they sell us about $300 billion more a year than we buy from them. So their economy is a great risk.
Yeah, I think the key here in a lot of these negotiations is that we need these countries less than they need us.
Exactly.
That's why we have a strong bargaining position. We only import about 12% relative to our GDP. And we're a self-sufficient economy. Even Chinese imports are only 2% relative to our GDP. And that's why these tariffs are not going to be inflationary. Inflation is an economy-wide price increases. That has nothing to do with, relative prices changing for tariffed goods, which may or may not happen, essentially. But it has nothing to do with inflation, which is what we saw 2 years ago, where basically the whole economy's prices, that's only caused by monetary policy and fiscal policy being out of whack.
And so this is another key point. Tom and I have been talking a lot about this, and we have a column that we've just written together on this, the point that you're making is that even if you accept the idea that the tariff may be somewhat inflationary, in other words, let's use the example that you buy toys from China and you put a tariff on those toys, then, all things equal, you're going to pay a little bit more for those toys because you're going to have to pick up the tax. But the rest, if you just look at tariffs in an isolation, you could make the argument that would cause prices to rise. But as you pointed out, all of the rest of the Trump agenda, reducing regulatory costs, cutting taxes to increase investment in the United States, producing more oil and gas and mineral resources here in the United States, those are disinflationary, are they not?
Yeah, no, exactly. The key is here, I think, I'm coming back to this again and again, which is we're a self-sufficient economy relative to other export and import-dependent economies. So basically, what's much more important for price reduction or deflation is domestic trade barriers, not foreign trade barriers, essentially.
What do you mean by that? What would you define for me and my audience what you mean by a domestic trade barrier?
So a trade barrier domestic is, let's say you have a regulation where it takes 5 years to build a plant because of environmental regulations. That's 5 years of foregone economic activity that doesn't show up in GDP. So we have all these regulatory change or deregulatory changes, I should say, and also the spending changes, which DOGE is basically trying to implement. That's much more important. That our domestic economy is much, much bigger than what we trade with foreigners. We trade with ourselves, right? We have, people selling and buying with U.S. citizen to U.S. citizen. And that part of the economy is much bigger share of our economic activity than some 12% roughly trading with U.S. citizens and foreigners, essentially. So the key is if you want to have, price reductions, going after the domestic market or, what I call domestic trade between U.S. citizens is far more important than what the press is focused on, which is one little bit of tariffs compared to, deregulatory tax reductions, energy price reduction through a larger output, legal immigration, which can always do, by the way, what illegal immigration. If we want low-skilled workers, we can certainly admit that through legal immigration.
Right.
It's not like we need illegal immigration to have low-skilled workers. We can always say that we want that through legal immigration. And that's going to be expanded, presumably, once we clamp down on dangerous illegal immigration.
Great point. So I want to go back to one of my heroes, and I think probably one of your heroes, Milton Friedman, who was at the University of Chicago, and I would argue the greatest economist of the last century, certainly one of the most influential economists of the last century. Now, Milton Friedman was a unilateral free trader. He basically preached that we should have free trade and low trade barriers regardless of what the rest of the world did. And that was his position, and I believed in that for a long time. I think Trump has maybe changed my opinion about this a little bit. But you're not advocating unilateral free trade. Do you oppose unilateral free trade, or what is your position on this?
Well, I think there's some merit to, by the way, Milton Friedman was my intellectual grandfather. His mentor was my mentor.
That's amazing. Okay.
Yeah. So I tend to be pretty aligned with the guy. And he was a great guy, by the way.
I loved Milton Friedman.
Incredible common sense. Just,
Yes.
What he talked about in terms of free trade never involved sort of an adversary being empowered by free trade, which is the China issue in my view, essentially. And he also didn't talk about how can a tariff threat or threatening to not trade with our great economy achieve things just as a threat of nuclear weapon achieves things without the key is without using them, without actually using them. Okay, that's the difference. He would be against implemented tariffs, but when I talk about tariffs used as a threat, I'm talking about non-implemented tariffs, and those are certainly not inflationary, or those are certainly not implemented taxes. You and I are both against higher taxes, presumably including tariffs, but it depends if they're used as a threat or not, and that's the key distinction in my view.
Well, I think it's a great point, and we only have a minute left. Talking to Tom Philipson, the great economist from the University of Chicago. He was in Trump's first term the chief economist for Donald Trump, and what an honor that must have been, Tom. But, if this works out, as you and I hope it will, then maybe we would actually move the world towards freer trade because these other countries would reduce their trade barriers.
Yeah, that was true in the first term as well of Trump. There was some discussion about, can we propose a 0-0 tariff with Europe, right?
Yes.
And there was, circulation and certainly debate among advisors whether that was a useful policy or not. But that's always been, with Europe, for example, we're certainly the victim, not the criminal when it comes to tariffs, because they have higher tariffs on us than we do on them. Germany has about 4 times our tariffs on cars that we have on them. So when I talk to European audience, which I did actually a couple of days ago, and my first, point to you is to the audience is, if you want to have Trump reduce your tariff, how about looking at yourself in the mirror first?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, Tom, thanks so much for taking time out of your Saturday afternoon. That's Tom Philipson, one of the great economists in the country, served as the chief economist for Donald Trump in his first term. This is the More Money Show, and when we get back, we'll be taking your calls at 1-800-848-9222. Do you think that Trump is doing a good job? Do you think Elon Musk is doing a good job? What would you like to see him cut? And what would you like to see him preserve in our budget? We'll be right back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. We are on WABC and affiliates throughout the country. Always an honor to be with you, and I'm so honored that so many of you have carved some time out on your Saturday afternoon to listen to the show. We have a great audience, and tell your friends about it because we just love doing the show, and we pick up affiliates throughout the year. We're on a roll right now, and we're going to take your calls in a minute about what you think about Elon Musk, and is he being unjustly criticized? Do you think he's trying to cut too much out of the budget or not enough? But before we get to that, I wanted to mention something I think is really important, and that has to do with this issue of Greenland. And we talked about this a little bit last week on the show and got a lot of flack about it. Most people actually seem to support the idea of the United States purchasing Greenland. I'm very much open to this idea. I think it's a really interesting idea that we could take Greenland as a strategic purchase. And what I wanted to let you all know is that the United States has purchased a lot of land since the founding of our country. And this goes back to, I'm just going to read some of these to you because people say, we can't be taking land and so on. We're not going to take the land. We're going to buy it. But look at this. I mean, you all know from your history books that one of the most important things that happened in the history of our country was in 1803, when we had something called the Louisiana Purchase, where we produced, by the way, this is great. We paid $15 million. Did you know that, Tim? $15 million for the biggest tract of land in North America. Probably about 4 cents an acre. I can't do the math in my head, but that was when we got so much of the southern states to become a part of our country, especially the southwestern states. And then after that came the famous Alaska Purchase, and that was when we purchased Alaska from Russia, of course, and we paid $7.2 million. $7.2 million from Alaska. That's what we get about every hour in terms of the amount of oil that we get from Alaska. And of course, we that's an important part of the United States today. We purchased, ready for this, 375 million acres for $7 million. At the time, by the way, for those of you who are American history buffs, you've heard of this before. It's called Seward's Folly. And who is Seward? Seward was the Secretary of State back, I believe that was under Grant. I am going to have to look that up. Who was president in 1867? I don't quite remember, but anyway, so we bought Alaska, then we did Oregon, and then of course we did famously in 1819. This actually came before this. We purchased Florida, and anybody know what country we purchased Florida from? Spain. Then we got Texas. And then we got areas of we purchased some areas from Mexico, on. And then, of course, Hawaii. And it service turned out well, not just for us, but for the people who lived in those areas. And so why not make Greenland part of the United States? But if you have an opinion on that, I'd love to hear from you. I'm in favor of the United States purchasing Greenland. Think about this. They may have massive amounts of oil or other resources that we don't even know about it under all that ice in Greenland. And there's only 50,000 people or something like that on the whole area of Greenland. So let's buy it. I think it's Denmark. I think Denmark owns Greenland, and let's make them a deal and make Greenland rich. Let's make Greenland great again, folks. How about that one? Okay, let's get to your calls. Mr. Producer, I believe we have on as our first caller, Russ.
Hi.
Russ, are you there?
Of course, Steve, I'm here. I'm waiting anxiously with bated breath to talk to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Where do you live, Russ?
I'm up here in White Plains, Westchester. I live in the house that Frances Perkins used to summer in. And she's,
no way. That's
I'm
awesome.
a Democrat all my life.
All right. So, Russ, are you a Republican or are you a Democrat, or you wish not to say?
No, I've been a Democrat since 1974, but I'm a Democrat that'd rather switch than fight. So I did vote for Trump twice.
Okay. So tell me about what you think about the first 3 weeks of Donald Trump. We've got Elon Musk, who's trying to shut down agencies. What do you think, Russ?
Well, I think we're having a reckoning. I'm excited. I'm a little scared, but I think Musk is allowing the problem to be misidentified. I mean, he did say it's a criminal organization referring to USAID, and I think that Elon derangement syndrome is more furious towards Elon than towards Trump, which is a good thing because Democrats feel betrayed by Elon. He's the golden boy of them.
I know.
Yeah, but I think they're allowing, it's not about the condoms and the trans training in Afghanistan. Elon makes it clear. This is about the USAID using these things as fronts for regime change, color revolutions that occurred here with Donald Trump. It was there and now it's here. I mean, you've read Confessions of an Economic Hitman. That's what they use on these countries to disrupt them. Georgia in the USSR, Ukraine in 2014, and now, Bannon says, I'll quickly summarize, Steve. Bannon is now saying that Trump is going to let Elon loose on the Pentagon, and I think that's where we're going to see real savings.
Look, I'm in favor of that. Russ, I'm a conservative. I've been a Republican my whole life, but I do believe that some of the biggest waste in our entire government is at the Pentagon. And my friend Newt Gingrich, when he became Speaker back in the early 90s, used to say that we shouldn't salute waste just because it's wearing a uniform. And there's so much truth to that, because I live down the street from the Pentagon. It is the biggest bureaucracy in the world. And you're talking about an institution that spends $800 billion a year. A lot of my conservative friends say we have to spend more. I'm like, spend more? Why can't we just get more efficiency out of the Defense Department? You got people who've been there, they have cobwebs in their offices. Nobody even knows what they do. I'm very much in favor of Elon Musk, trying to reform the Pentagon. What do you think?
This is what I get. You absolutely hit the nail on the head. Democrats would love this, but I think Democrats are sold a false consciousness by their own leaders based on self-righteousness. These are things like Joe Concha said, this is a losing electoral strategy, getting behind trans people, migrant crime, don't get rid of the CIA. I mean, it's just crazy, Steve. You went through the 60s. You're old enough to remember.
So, Russ, you sound like a very rational, common sense person, like most Americans. And so I just have to ask you, if you don't sound like a Democrat, and so why are you still a Democrat if you believe in common sense economics and common sense policies that would make our country more prosperous?
Well, I think the Democrat Party left us like it did Dominic Carter.
Well, why haven't you left the Democratic Party then?
Because I think I can change it back. What I think might happen is a lot of Democrats going into the Republican Party, you're going to experience a little reckoning there in the Republican Party.
Yes.
But, one quick thing, do we get free college and health care like they get in Greenland? And one other thing, when the chicken farmers cull all these birds, the price obviously goes up. Do they get an infusion from their insurance? And I'll leave it there, Steve. Thank you very much.
That's great. Well, Russ, great call. I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to look that up and see what happens when we kill these millions of chickens. Who bears the cost of that? We've got this avian flu issue, and here's an interesting question. I can't figure this one out, and it's relevant to the Super Bowl, which is obviously tomorrow, which is egg prices have gone way up. And yet chicken wing prices have gone down. So I'm trying to figure out why that is. And if anybody knows the answer to that question, I would love for you to call in and educate us, because I'm going to say it again. The egg prices have I think it's in some places like $8-10 a dozen for eggs right now, but the chicken wings are falling in price. So I find that to be kind of a conundrum. All right, let's go to our next caller. Having fun on a Saturday afternoon, and I believe we have George as our next caller. George, are you still there?
Got me, kid.
Who's that? What's that?
Here I am. I'm here.
Okay, George, sorry, I was having a little trouble hearing you. So are you a Republican or Democrat?
40 years a Democrat, now Republican.
Oh, really? So you've done the transition. Yeah. So what do you make of what Trump is doing? What do you make of what Elon Musk is doing?
Well, I'm a little cautious because I remember things like George Bush, but I think he's going too far too fast. I like what he's doing. There's a lot of fat that's got to be cut.
Yep.
But there's a lot of people that need help. I grew up on welfare. I had nothing. And the old saying, rub two nickels together, you get three. But as soon as you stop moving, you got two. That's the way I was brought up. So I have funds now. But the bottom line is the country has a problem with its identification. And Uncle Joe, Slow Joe, I could be more vicious, but he let this go on, but he was just a puppet. They had an ulterior motive to dumb down our country so far that we can't crawl out of it. Fortunately, there's enough people like, I believe, me, that's 73 years old and sees common sense and still has common decency, which I'm unable to instill in my kids, which are 42, 40, and then 39.
Wow. Well, George, I've got a bunch of callers on the line. Great points. What I think all of us would agree, whether Republicans, Democrats, Independents, that we need common sense policies in Washington. This is what my friend and the owner of this station, John Catsimatidis, says all the time. Common sense. It's not left or right. It's just, does this make sense? And so much of what we've done in the last 10, 12, 15 years does not make sense. And it has put us in a hole. And I think I don't always agree with Donald Trump. I am not a rah-rah Republican. I know that Republicans sometimes are sometimes worse enemies to prosperity than Democrats are. But I think Donald Trump is oriented towards common sense economics, and that will be a big, big improvement. I guess, Mr. Producer, is Paul next on the list? Paul, are you there?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm in an elevator in the Bronx right now, but
all right. You know what, Paul? We can barely hear you, so why don't you call back when you're out of the elevator, and we will take you. So let's move to JJ. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Moore.
Yes, thank you for calling. Are you a Republican or a Democrat?
I am a Republican, sir.
Okay.
My
what do you think about? Hold on. Let me ask you this. This is the question of the day. Do you support or do you oppose what Elon Musk is trying to do to our government?
100%. Let's go through the books and find out what's going on.
Okay, I love it. Let's look under the hood. Let's see where the money is going. Now, I'm going to ask you a question, JD, because we did a poll recently at Unleash Prosperity. We asked people what percent of every dollar, in other words, how many cents out of every dollar do you think is wasted? And I want to get what would you say is the number of cents out of every dollar that is wasted in Washington?
Probably about 35%.
Wow. Well, it's interesting because that's about where the most Americans are. In fact, I think what was the mean? 38. Tim Desher is here today as my producer here in Washington. I think it was 35 to 38 cents out of every dollar. So you're happy with the way things are going?
The way that Trump is going about it, he's a builder. He should know better than to start at the penthouse and work your way down. You got to start on Main Street. There's 53 million small businesses nationwide.
Yes.
With basically 45% of GDP is, it's basically mom and pop businesses that hire 10 or less people. And there's nobody out here helping them. Banks won't help you get money to try to build your business. The government, the SBA, all right, Small Business Administration, you got to have 200 or more employees before they even look at you. We're in entrepreneurship on the street. We're not a small business. So when you start losing small businesses by the millions, you're going to have a lot of unemployed people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
and
they
so,
need to start looking.
So you're happy with the way things are going now in Washington under Donald Trump?
Yes. But he needs
well, I'm going to tell him that he's got fans in New York, even in New York. So great call. I got to take a break now. We are going to now listen to two of the top financial analysts in the country, two good friends, but two people who know more about our financial system than just about anybody. I'm talking about Bob and Ryan Payne, who are going to instruct you on how you can make more money.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore.
Stephen Moore is with us, economist.
With more than 30 years experience as an economist and as a leading thinker of government on business, showing deep understanding of the shifts in the global economy. He's leading economist Steve Moore with More Money on Talk Radio 77 WABC. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. It is 2:00. It is our second hour. We're on every Saturday afternoon. We are live and in color, and we will be taking more of your calls later in the show. 1-800-848-9222 is the More Money hotline. I always enjoy talking to folks, and if you're a Democrat, I want you to call in. And I want to hear some criticisms of what Trump is doing, because we've taken 4 or 5 callers already today, most of them being pretty supportive of what Trump is doing. But if you're someone who's worried about what he's doing, do you think he's taking too much of a chainsaw to the budget? It's not a big enough chainsaw for me. I mean, I live in Washington, D.C. I see the amount of incredible waste in this town and self-serving nature of how government works that I would like to see our government cut in half. Frankly, we're at $7 trillion. I think we could do everything the government needs to do for about $3.5 to $4 trillion. I really do. And I believe that the amount of fraud in our budget is disgusting and it is outrageous and nobody does anything about it. The money is it just pours into Washington like a river. And what you all have to understand outside of the confines of the Washington Beltway is that you send us money, you send us $5 or $6 trillion a year, and then we take $1 trillion off the top and then send it back to you. And I never could understand, even if you're a liberal Democrat, how does that make sense? How does that benefit anybody except Washington, D.C.? There's an old saying about Washington, D.C. that is so true, that this is a city where people come to do good and end up doing well. And so we have, all of these $1 million, $2, $3, $4, $5, $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 million homes in the Washington area because, when you collect $5 trillion in tax revenues and just take a slice of that off the top, you're really robbing the American people. I think Trump is calling out this racket because it is a racket. Government is a racket. And I'm not saying that everything that what we need government, obviously, we need a lean, efficient, and customer-friendly government. And frankly, we have none of that right now. But I wanted to tell you that I wrote a column in the hotline the other day. And by the way, if you're not getting the Unleash Prosperity hotline, why in the world, what is wrong with you if you're not getting rid of this? We're getting this delivered to you every single 5 mornings a week for absolutely free. I'm not selling anything to anybody. There's no Biden inflation here. There's no advertising. It's just free information for you every day. Sign up for the UnleashProsperity.com hotline. Just go to that website, unleashprosperity.com, and just sign up. And if you like it, as you know, we've got over 100,000 people who are receiving it every day, and we get incredibly positive feedback. We try to use humor. It's very short. You can read it in 5 minutes every morning. That's the Unleash Prosperity hotline. But in the most recent hotline, we had, and I'm just looking this up as we speak, we had a really kind of interesting column on how Patrick Mahomes, the title of this was Patrick Mahomes for President. And what we did was we just quoted from Patrick Mahomes. Here it is. Thank you, Tim. So this is, by the way, I have no horse in this race. I'm a Chicago Bears fan. So whether Kansas City wins the Super Bowl or the Philadelphia Eagles, well, I guess I'm going to have to root for the Kansas City Chiefs because I cannot stand the Philadelphia Eagles. But I have to say I was, and I don't, if it's not the Bears, I don't really care who wins. And we haven't won a Super Bowl since 1985. So that's been a long drought, 39 years or something like that. But I was so impressed with this interview of Patrick Mahomes, who is obviously the superstar quarterback for the Chiefs. And I would say probably the third most famous person in these United States behind Donald Trump, and probably Taylor Swift is probably the second most famous person in the country. But Patrick Mahomes is a great quarterback. He has a chance to win his third straight Super Bowl, and that has never been done. There's never been a team that's won 3 straight Super Bowls, so that would be quite a feat if he's able to pull this off. But he was asked about Donald Trump. And he was asked about whether he thinks that whether he wants Donald Trump to attend the Super Bowl, because he will be there tomorrow, I think, for the pregame ceremony. He will be in New Orleans in the Dome there. And I was wondering what Patrick Mahomes, how he would respond to this, and he handled it so effectively. It was like, eluding a 240-pound linebacker blitzing, because he was so deft in his answer. And it was kind of a gotcha question. What do you think about Donald Trump being there? And here's what he said. He said, "It's always cool to be able to play in front of a sitting president. someone that is at the top position in our country. And then he was asked about the fact that Trump had praised Mahomes, saying he's a good winner, and was praiseworthy of Mahomes. The president was. And so he was asked about that. What do you think about being praised by Donald Trump? And again, they were trying to trap him into saying, something political and then attacking him. So, but here's what Mahomes said. He said, quote, "It's cool to hear that he's seen me play football and respects the game that I play." Great answer. Great answer. The guy should be a politician. And then he was asked during this. Now, this was earlier. He was asked, "What do you think about Donald Trump? Who are you going to vote for?" And here was his answer. It was really great. He said, quote, he said, "I don't want my place and my platform to be used to endorse a candidate or do whatever either way." He said, "My place is to inform people to get registered to vote." Then he continued, "It's to inform people to do their own research and then make the best decision for them and their family," unquote. Wow, I love this guy. Then he was asked to press on by the media, and he said, quote, "I've grown up with people from every aspect of life and every background. I think the best thing about a football locker room is people can come together and achieve something and achieve a common goal. If we can do that as a nation, I think we can get the best out of each other. I think that's something that I do every single day." This is amazing. I mean, that you couldn't say that any better. And so that's why I said in our hotline, Patrick Mahomes for president, because he sounds like a great patriot. By the way, I don't know. I've never really met Patrick Mahomes, but he sounds like a great patriot. He seems wise in his young years. He's still a young man. And I wish we had more of that. Politics isn't everything. And we should, I'm going to quote one more time what he said. We should all try to achieve a common goal. And if we can do that as a nation, I think we can get the best out of each other. I think that's something that I do every day. And he does. He's a winner and he's a superstar. And so I really admire that in Patrick Mahomes. Now, the Super Bowl is going to be held in New Orleans, as you know, and we pray that there aren't any problems with shootings or anything like that. And then Trump will show up. And I think it's great. I think he's great. It's great that he'll be at the top sporting event of the country for the year. And I think it's I'll be curious to see how he is received there. New Orleans is in the South, and Trump is extremely popular in these southern states. So I think he'll get a warm welcome. And I think here's the other thing. That poll that I was talking about earlier on the show, and we're going to talk to John McLaughlin about that in a few minutes, that shows Trump is popular. What's really interesting is that his policies are even more popular than than he is himself. And people are on board this agenda of putting America first and making America great again and getting rid of government waste. And so this isn't controversial. That's what I'm trying to tell you. It isn't controversial. It's not right wing. It's not left wing. And I am so frustrated by all of these liberals who've been pontificating about good government. Good government. And I'm for good government. Everyone listening to the show, I hope you're all for good government. Yes, we want good and efficient government that provides for some of the needs of our nation. But then when somebody like Elon Musk points out the waste, they go crazy. They just go bat crazy, and they act as if this is some kind of assault against America. It is not assault against America to demand that we get the value for the tax dollars that we pay. And Trump going to insist that happens. And I'll tell you, folks, I don't know if we can balance the budget by eliminating the waste, but we can go a long way towards getting to fiscal sanity back in Washington. We will be right back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
This is More Money with economist Steve Moore. Now, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show. We're having some fun on a Saturday afternoon, and I hope educating folks as well. I'm being educated by listening to you and our guests. I knew I was going to step in, and I just knew this was going to happen, Tim, as soon as I said that I was rooting against the Eagles, because, of course, we have a lot of Eagles fans in the Philadelphia area that listen to the show. I'm getting pilloried with emails and texts from friends and listeners, and I appreciate that. By the way, I love hearing from you all. And so here's one from one of my, I'm not going to mention his name, but he's a regular listener of the show. And he said, "So you don't like my Philadelphia Eagles, huh?" And then he says, "Here's something to think about. Pennsylvania delivered the goods for Trump, and a big slug of that came from Northeast Philadelphia, which assaulted your people." Remember that. Not Taylor Swift, not Missouri, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Go Eagles. That is a great text, and I love to hear from you folks. And I wanted to mention also that if you ever want to contact me directly, because I love to hear from people. I like to know what people think and what, whether they approve or disapprove of the show. And so if you want to contact me, just go to steve@unleashprosperitynow.com. That's steve@unleashprosperitynow.com. And I'm happy. I always reply to people's posts and to their emails and to their texts. So thanks so much for getting in touch. Okay. So we have two of the best political minds in the country that are going to come on the show together. They're both good friends, but they're also super smart. They've been in the business a long, long time. We're going to have a fun, lively discussion on what's going on with the political situation today. How is Donald Trump doing? What's he doing right? What's he doing wrong? And so first we have John McLaughlin. John, are you there?
I'm here.
John McLaughlin, thanks for joining. He is one of the best pollsters in the country, and has just done a poll for us that we're going to talk about. And then also we have John Fund from National Review. He also works with me at Unleash Prosperity. He did, 20 years at the Wall Street Journal, one of the sharpest political minds we have. John Fund, thanks for joining.
Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. So we got a lot to cover, and I want to start, John McLaughlin, with you because you very kindly did a survey for us at the Unleash Prosperity on what people think about how much waste there is. But before we get into those particular questions, why don't you give us a sense of what you're learning about the mood of the American people from this poll that you just did?
Well, the poll was done at the end of January, where Trump was only in the office for like a week, and although they still thought the country was in the right on the wrong track, it fell from 66 to 58% saying wrong track, and it actually closed a net of 16 points because the right direction rose from 24 to 32. And what's amazing is the Democrats are collapsing, and Trump has a positive job approval, 52 to 43. On his policies specifically, they approve of his policies among all voters that was modeled after the last election. 57 to 38, they support his policies.
So hold on, John. John, when you say support his policies, you mean in general or with particular policies?
In general, because it gets even higher when you talk about certain things. Okay. So like deporting, in December, we saw deporting criminal illegal aliens. They support 86 to 8. I guess the 8% were criminals.
Hold on. The 86 to 8?
Yeah. And the Democrats are.
I guess those 8% are the people who worked in the Biden White House.
You're right. True. And then, it's sad. The Lake and Riley bill, you had Democrats voting against that, where you're trying to, here the girl was murdered by an illegal immigrant, and they're trying to stop law enforcement from getting these criminals out. And 66 to 27, they support just deporting illegal immigrants, period. And by the way, keeping the Trump tax cuts, 70 to 17 they support, 58% of the Democrats.
Wow.
No tax on overtime they support, 66-25, 59% of the Democrats.
Wow.
No tax on tips they support, 71-21, 64% of the Democrats. And no tax on Social Security they support, 82-11, 72% of the Democrats. So President Trump has a huge mandate to do what he's doing, and the Democrats are in his way. It's crazy. But if they want to destroy their party, let them.
So it's interesting to me, John McLaughlin. I'll turn to you first, and then John Fund. I'd like your thoughts on this. I'm trying to understand what the Democrat strategy is, and whatever it is, it certainly doesn't seem to be working. But one of the things they keep talking about, because it's their standard go-to line, is tax cuts for the rich. And John McLaughlin, let me start with you on that. Does that play?
It used to play for them, but it doesn't play anymore because people find out with taxes that we're all rich. Because
right, exactly. So, yeah, if you have a job, you're rich, right?
Exactly.
So, John Fund, what do you think about that?
Look, we're going to be ending this initial burst of activity and then getting down to trench warfare. And that's going to be passage of the tax cuts.
That's right.
The budget cuts. The popularity that John McLaughlin describes is real, but we're going to enter some choppy waters. The thing I think Trump has to do is pay attention to the Republican members of the House of Representatives. This is a nervous Nelly group of people in most cases. They go with the winds. Not many sit in marginal districts, but there are about 30 members that Trump is going to have to babysit, and he's simply going to have to tell them two things. One, we either make history or we get swept away by it. Because in midterm elections, normally the party in power loses seats, and the Republicans only have a 5-seat majority. Yes. Trump has to say, this is historic, this is our only shot. He also has to say, look, in the end, we've seen this with things like shutting down AID and going after waste, fraud, and abuse. If we act boldly enough, people who've never voted before, and we saw this happen in 2024 and throughout every Trump election, are going to sit up and take notice and say, these people are different. Maybe we'll do something that we've never done before, vote in the midterm election. It's a gamble, but Trump has to basically put everything on the line on getting enough people out to vote that the Republicans keep the House in 2026. I think he can do it.
I agree with that. I think, and I was on Larry Kudlow's show earlier today on this same station, and we were making that, go for the gold. You've got the wind behind you right now, and you're right, John Fund, that, who knows, voters are fickle. They can, the political mood can change overnight. But right now, when you're riding on this crest, what are they waiting for, John Fund? I mean, get the budget done, get the tax cut done, do it quickly. You do what FDR did when he came into office, and a blizzard of activity before the other side even knew what hit them. Reagan did that very effectively too. So do you think he can get it done, John? Do you think there's enough unity in the Republican Party? They only have a 2 or 3 seat majority in the House of 435 people.
Well, by the time they vote on the final package, the Republican majority will be restored. There's some special elections coming up. The real issue is going to be this. Each Republican congressman knows that their vote is essential to the success of the overall bill.
Right.
So they, of course, human nature, will want something special for their district.
Right.
If you're in the Northeast, you're going to want, changing the salt deduction.
Right. Right.
If it's some place that has a bridge or a dam that needs to be shored up, you need that. Trump has got to put on the line, and I think he's done this very successfully with some members of Congress. He's got to say, look, on something as fundamental as this, your concerns are second to the national interest.
That's
and the national interest are that we have to extend this tax cut, we have to reform government, we have to restrain spending, we have to get rid of the open borders policy, and we have to restore common sense and sanity of the government. He's got to literally say, and if you don't do that, if you're not on board, you're going to be overboard.
Yeah. Well, you got to hang together or hang separately. John McLaughlin, what do you think about what John Fund just said?
I think it's exactly right. And the Democrats, it's all about power. And what they're trying to do is, those of us who are old enough to remember, I used to work for Arthur Finkelstein, who polled for Reagan. We lost 26 House seats because the Reagan tax cuts didn't go into effect until 1983. The Trump tax cuts didn't get passed till December of 2017 because, I'd spoken to the president, why are you doing health care first? And he says, well, Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan told me I need the savings. I'm like, you're crazy. It's like Stalingrad health care. You need to pass your tax cuts. And when he did, he had a growing economy. But, you have to do it right away. And the Democrats know that, so they're trying to stall. By the way, in New York, and John Fund will love this because he's the expert on election integrity. In New York, Kathy Hochul and Hakeem Jeffries are conspiring to deny the people of the North Country in New York 21 representation. They have put in a bill on midnight of Super Bowl weekend that they're going to postpone the special election. They're going to change the state election law to postpone the special election for when Stefanik resigns until November, until the November election day.
John, what do you think of that?
Well, people have been playing games with special elections for a long time. My point is this. In all other previous cases, the governors of states that delay special elections have done it with existing law. This is an attempt to march in, change the law,
outrageous,
and force people to go without representation in Congress for 9 months. That is an outrage.
So I would like to ask you about about a column I just read this morning in the Wall Street Journal by our old friend John Fund named Freeman. James Freeman, and he had a really interesting column about how many lifelong Democrats were agreeing with Trump on so many of the issues that he's embraced, and one of them was this issue of the transgender sports. And he quoted extensively from people like Martina Navratilova, which a very famous Wimbledon champion, one of the greatest women tennis players of all time, who's been a lifelong Democrat, John McLaughlin. And she just tore into the Democrats, saying, that this transgender thing, this idea of letting males play in women's sports, is destroying, the whole basis of women's sports, and how unfair it was, and how out of touch Democrats were with common sense issues. And she went on, and there were a number of others who have been lifelong Democrats who said the same thing. And I'm just using that transgender issue as an example of how extreme the Democrats have become and how they're turning away their own party.
Yep, and it's crushed them. In that January survey, it's on our website, McLaughlinOnline.com, banning biological men from women's sports is supported by 67% of all voters. Only 23% oppose.
By the way, John, I'm shocked that there's 23% of voters who actually support allowing men play in women's sports, but nonetheless, that's an amazing number.
Yeah, and the Democrats, they didn't understand, like during the Trump campaign, when I was working for the president, he said I was a good pollster only because I worked for Trump. But let me tell you, he made the polls come right. But the thing was, we ran the ad about Kamala Harris, a video of her supporting taxpayers paying for transgender surgeries while guys are in prison. I mean, their ideology is so bizarre and so extreme that it shocked people. They didn't realize, when they see that, they're like, she really is radical. She really is nutty.
You know what, John? It's so interesting you should mention that ad, because I live in the D.C. area, and Virginia was a state that was in play. And they showed that ad over and over again, and I have to say that ad was a stroke of genius, because it wasn't even just about the transgender issue. It basically typecast Kamala Harris as a crazy woman. I mean, any woman who would be in favor of, the government paying for transgender operation for criminals in prison, that's just not a normal person. And I thought the ad was spectacular, and I think it was highly effective.
It was. I mean, it brought sports moms to us. We saw this in the suburban vote, where all of a sudden you saw them at the White House when the president was signing the executive order. All these moms who care about their daughters, they don't want men in their daughters' locker rooms. They don't want men beating up their daughters in a basketball game or wrestling or whatever, volleyball. And, it's like the support was there. It's just common sense. And President Trump, if you want to know what he's doing, when he tells you what he's going to do, that's what he's doing as president, and that's what he's doing, and the majority of Americans support him.
John Fund, we have just 1 minute before you have to take a hard break. And by the way, I hope the two of you, I'd love it if you two could hold over, because This is a fascinating conversation. But
can I just say something quickly to what
Go
John
ahead.
said? Look, here's the unspoken truth. A large number of gays, perhaps a majority, have no interest in having trans sports. They just it's not part of what they campaigned for. It's not part of their own lives. Mm-hmm. What's happening is a complete divide, and we're seeing this in USAID and the spending. There's a complete divide between the American people and the people who are taking federal contracts and money in Washington. Mm-hmm. The Human Rights Campaign Fund just laid off 20% of its workforce. Now, why did the Human Rights Campaign Fund spend so much time on trans sports? It did that because they won the gay marriage battle, and like the March of Dimes with polio, they had to have a new issue. So they pivoted. But the issue that they've grabbed, which is having transgender males in women's sports, is not one that is a priority with even liberals or gays. So what we're seeing is a divide between people taking money for very selfish reasons in Washington and the ordinary concerns of Americans, including liberals, who don't even want part of that.
So true. All right, John, we got to take a quick break. That's John McLaughlin and John Fund. We'll be right back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC.
It's More Money with leading economist Steve Moore. Now, here's your host, Steve Moore.
Welcome back, folks. This is the More Money Show on WABC. I hope you're all having a wonderful weekend. I am going to continue my segment with John Fund, formerly of the Wall Street Journal, now writes for National Review, works with Unleash Prosperity, and is one of the top political analysts in the country. And then we also have one of the top political pollsters in the country, John McLaughlin, who's in the business a long time, and I very much respect his polls. In fact, I respect his polls so much we just did a poll with him. Gentlemen, thanks again for holding on. We'll pay you a little overtime this time, and by the way, there's no tax on overtime now, so that makes it a little more attractive. John McLaughlin, I wanted to ask you about the two poll questions that we added to your most recent poll about waste in government. And the one that I found was really fascinating was, we asked how many cents out of every dollar do you think is wasted? And then there was another question related to that. So tell us what you found.
Well, you had the one question where, does the federal government does a better job than most people give it credit for? Only 25% agree with that statement. 64% said the federal government is too wasteful and inefficient, and it was across all party lines, and whether you voted for Trump or Harris or who you vote for Congress next time. And then we asked, in your own personal opinion, how much of the federal budget do you think is wasteful spending? And we gave them groups of, like 10% or less, 11 to 20, 21, 30, 20, all the way up to more than 90%. And when you took the mean average, it was 38% of the federal government they think is wasted. That's 1,000 voters. And if you voted for Trump, it was 41%, Harris 35%. If you Republican, 41%, Democrat 36%, Independents 38%. So it's really across the board, ideologically and partisan-wise, and most Americans, their perception is that 38% of every dollar that they send the federal government is waste.
Yeah, and that's, by the way, that's if they're right about that, John McLaughlin, that's $2 trillion a year that is wasted. By the way, I think I would have said about 33%. Maybe I'm a little bit lower than
you're getting weak there, Steve.
Yeah, right.
John, you need to talk to him. You got to toughen him up. It's higher than that.
Right. So, John Fund, what the takeaway that I read from John McLaughlin's latest poll, in just all of the questions they asked, it's a fascinating poll, is just how completely out of touch Washington is with where the American people are. It's almost like people inside the Beltway are living in some kind of bubble.
Bubble? It's an iron dome. Look,
an iron dome, yeah.
Look, common sense does not penetrate it. Look, the Public Choice School of Economics proved that bureaucrats are like any other people. They engage in self-profit and maximizing behavior. They want more. And government is the easiest place to get money if you can't succeed in the private sector. So Washington attracts people who try to get government money. And this is across the board. The Pentagon has failed its last 7 straight audits. John Lehman, the former Secretary of the Navy under Reagan, says one of the most important things Donald Trump can do is repair and replace the federal defense contracting system, which is cost plus. It means we pay whatever the military charges us for a weapons system plus whatever their costs are, which leads to outrageous expenditures. Donald Trump knows this. He tells this story about the new Air Force One jet and how he managed to get a lot of savings out of that because he simply insisted that there be competitive bidding. The bottom line is Washington exists to spend our money. And we have to understand that if we don't put constraints on it, they're going to bleed us dry. So I believe that what Donald Trump is doing is injecting common sense into our budget process. People are screaming. When people are screaming as loudly as they are in Washington today, you know he's over the target. By the way, those Congress people who went in front of the Department of Education and demanded entrance, saying they had been ignored, now they know how parents in America have felt over the last 45 years
Great point.
since the Department of Education was founded. This is a revolt against the common sense reformers who have arrived in Washington, and the more they're screaming, the more we know they're on target.
So yesterday I was on Fox News and I said something about how I am 64 and next week I turn 65, and just made the point that I will then be eligible for Social Security and Medicare. And I was just suggesting that maybe people like me don't need to get all of these government benefits, and the retirement age could be lifted a little bit. Oh my God, the left went completely crazy on this, and oh my God, Steve Moore he's a Trump advisor, he wants to cut Social Security. See what we said. And John McLaughlin, this is for you, but it sounds like the Democrats, every time they're on the defensive, they always say Social Security and Medicare. They want to cut Social Security and Medicare. And my opinion is probably Republicans shouldn't even mention the word Social Security and Medicare, but because those are two of the most popular programs, right?
Right, and the problem you have with it is most people, by the way, half the voters in the country will tell you that they don't have 401ks, they don't have retirement savings.
Right.
So those voters, they say they've been paying in Social Security all their lives, and what they're really upset about is they're going to give it to illegal immigrants. And by the way, one of the great reforms they could have is Medicaid, because Biden increased Medicaid spending, but you could be an able-bodied adult and not working and not looking for a job, and they will pay for your health care through Medicaid.
Ridiculous.
You should be required to work, and you could save, $100 billion if they did that reform. It just makes common sense.
John Fund, what are your thoughts about this? You fought these battles.
The great genius of FDR and Lyndon Johnson when they created programs like Social Security and Medicare was that because they had payroll taxes from people's paychecks and also forced Medicare recipients to pay premiums, they created the myth that these programs are things that the people themselves have paid for. In reality, of course, there are enormous subsidies to Social Security recipients and Medicare recipients. We're not going to change that overnight. What we need to do is use, for example, with Medicare, price transparency and changing and getting people like Dr. Oz, who's going to take charge of Medicare and Medicaid services, get them in there, have the audits that can reduce the fraud levels, change the formulas, change the compensation formulas, ignore what the hospitals and the other pressure groups say temporarily, and rationalize the system. Then we can have a later discussion about reforming the program, for example, on Social Security, allowing people to take some of their payroll taxes and investing it into the stock market or private systems. That is going to be a two-stage battle. But having Elon Musk and his marauders go through Medicare and Medicaid now is the first necessary step.
Yeah. Yep. So, John McLaughlin, in the latest poll you did that we've been talking about, what was there anything that surprised you in that poll?
It's a pleasant surprise that President Trump is popular and has support for his policies, but it's because they're getting the message out about what they're doing. By the way, going to John Fund's point and to your point, we were running ads during the Trump campaign that were going after Kamala Harris because they wanted to raise taxes on unrealized capital gains. They wanted to raise taxes, would have been on people's homes and 401ks. Half the people now have 401ks. We should be trying to find out, how we can encourage people to have more of their own savings that the government doesn't control for their retirement and for their health care. So there's a lot more reforms that we have, whether it's health savings accounts, whether it's personal retirement accounts. We need to encourage people that they have control of their own financial future and not the government. And
that's for sure. Well, I've long supported the idea of letting people put their Social Security tax dollars into a 401k account. They would be getting 2 to 3 times more money in that way. We've only got about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to both ask you one last question. It's something that concerns me, and I'm a big Trump guy. I think he's doing an amazing job. But John McLaughlin, I mean, every time you turn on the TV, it's Trump, 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 Trump. Everywhere he's going to be at the Super Bowl. He's, just in the public eye 24/7. And one of the things that worries me a little bit is Trump fatigue. He's popular now, but people don't want politics in their face all of the time. And I just wonder, should he tone it down a little bit? Should he not always be in the spotlight? He loves to be in the spotlight, but is there a risk of Trump fatigue? John McLaughlin, I'd like you to go first on that.
Well, good luck with that.
Exactly.
I worked with Reagan, you'd write him a script. He was perfect. And he'd do his 30-second ad. He'd do an Oval Office dress. He was great. Arnold, I worked with, and Arnold was an action figure because we had action.
Right.
Trump is the first reality TV president, and because he had the highest rated reality TV show, and he didn't run in 20. We wrote a plan for him to run in 2011 and 2012. He didn't run because they were going to take his show off the air. He wasn't ready. But let me tell you what, it's different now. People don't tune into TV like, you don't have couch potatoes. You have to hunt. You have podcasts. People, when they want to pay attention to Trump, you go on his social media or you go on X or whatever. And a lot of people just aren't watching. It's harder to get a message through right now. So,
John Fund, sorry, go ahead, John.
I think that what you say, Steve, is the old media. The old media is where everybody was watching the same thing or reading the same thing. Now everything is niche. And I believe that there are a certain number of people who are going to get tired of Donald Trump, and they're going to tune him out. They're not going to have to watch everything he says and does. I think Trump recognizes that the message he has to get out has to be everywhere. You have to repeat it over and over and over again until people get it. Now, he could be more careful and targeted in his messages. Don't go on riffs, off in the distance about some guy who's attacking you on Twitter or something like that. Focus on what he's doing for the American people, the common sense reforms, and why people are actually opposing him, the real reasons they're opposing him. But otherwise, I think the Trump show, those who are going to be entertained by it are going to be fascinated. Otherwise, they're going to be tuned out. And I think that in the end, Trump's message, repeated enough, will sink in.
Thanks, gentlemen. That's John McLaughlin and John Fund, two of the best in the business and politics. Appreciate you guys carving out some time in your Saturday afternoon to come on. We have about 3 minutes before we have to take a hard break. Mr. Producer, I just want to make sure, do we have any callers that have been waiting on the line? Who do we go with next?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Does the Biden pardons extend to the family jiggling with income taxes?
I'm not sure I understand your question. Is it what?
Can Musk go after the Biden family for money they obtained from Biden's overseas deals?
Oh, well, that's a great question, sir. I appreciate that question because there was so much fraudulent money, illegal money that we now know went into the Biden family, and it's a great question. I'm gonna get to the bottom of that, sir. I'm gonna find out whether that was any of that was paid in taxes, and if not, but I don't know if it matters though because they gave a blanket pardon to the Biden family. I think it was outrageous. Do we have time for one more caller, Mr. Producer? Okay, you were on, sir. We don't have a lot of time. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Paul.
Hi, Paul.
You asked earlier about if people were in favor of what Elon Musk is doing, and I think that it's great to get to the bottom of all the waste in government for which it's probably even underreported. That statistic about 37% waste, it's probably more double than that. But the thing is his approach of how he's doing it, to just walk into these departments and just literally start telling everybody to go home, unplugging computers, slashing everything. The right way to do it would be to come in and do a proper assessment with everything in place before you just take a sledgehammer and destroy things. I just think it's not the appropriate way to do it, and I bet you there's a lot of negative ramifications that come out as a result of his approach versus doing it the proper way. Come in, audit, get the right information, and then make moves.
Yeah, good call. I think it's a great point. I think that we want to do this. We want to downsize government. We want to do it in a way that is fair and is humane. And by the way, we're giving these federal workers 8 months of severance pay, which is a lot of money that they're getting. How many people get that, by the way, if they're fired from a private sector job? Or not many people get that kind of deal, and then they can go and work in a second job. So I think it's about time we downsize the bureaucracy. Trump is doing that. I think he has the American people behind him, and I wish these people well. I hope now you have to go in the private sector, folks, and get a real job if you've been working at Club Fed for the last 20 years of your life. Folks, we are now going to hear from my two friends, Bob and Ryan Payne, who are going to give you some great advice about the economy, about finance, about how to make more money. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. We'll be back next weekend, same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great weekend, folks.
It's Ocean Drive in Coney Island.
Ocean Drive is the only luxury rentals in New York with a spectacular ocean view. You wake up in the morning and breathe that ocean air. I'll certify that you're going to live 10 years longer. When I became successful, I wanted to live on the ocean. If you have worked hard, you deserve an apartment on Ocean Drive too. Go to oceandrivenyc.com and reward yourself.
If you're a policeman, fireman, doctor, nurse, or teacher, you qualify for a limited time offer at oceandrivenyc.com. Terms and conditions apply.